Right. So very briefly, emotional contagion is this idea that like my emotions can spread to other people without me necessarily conveying them verbally, without you necessarily knowing what my emotions are. And there's been a lot of work showing that it takes place, and that most of the arguments were around physical things, like either I could see you, or I could sense it through something. It could be even smell. And our work was the first to sort of examine this in a text-based space, and we showed that in experiments in my lab at Cornell that you could have emotional contagion via text. And then my colleague and friend Adam Kramer was interested in looking at motion in networks at scale. And they were worried about that at the time because there were some early studies coming out saying, hey, Facebook's newsfeed is all like optimized self-presentation. So you go on, you look at everybody else's perfect life, and you feel bad via social comparison. And I think social comparison is a real thing. I do think that it's overblown. Like, I don't think people are constantly feeling like, envy when they go online. But that was a real concern because for Facebook, it's like, well, if our like main product is actually depressing people, we need to know about that. So that's their motivation. And I'd been doing this in the lab with small groups, people, dyads. So Facebook was doing this study, and Adam asked if I wanted to be involved and help out, and I did. So that's how the study came to be. And when we went through the results, we found that opposite what you'd predict for social comparison, when Facebook sort of demoted, say, negative emotion posts in your feed. So let's say your feed, there's 1,500 pieces of content that Facebook could show you in your news feed. And most people will look at 15 to 20. So Facebook's having to like figure out what those top, say, 30 are. And they would demote them if you were in the negative emotion condition. They would demote sort of sad posts with sad information. And if you were in the positive emotion one, then they would demote things that were positive. So they never went away or anything like that, and they weren't directed at you. They were just put down in the algorithmic curated feed. And what we found were super tiny effects that were so tiny that the only way we were able to detect them was the massive sort of scale of the study. But the effects were consistent with an emotional contagion story. That is, when you were seeing more, or you were seeing less sad stuff, your writing when you posted was less sad and more positive. And when you saw less happy, your posts had less happy and more sad in them. Whereas, so it's it's actually a nice finding in a way. It's like, oh yeah, if you see your friends are happy and you are more happy. And that goes against the social comparison, which would have been that if you saw less sad stuff, then you'd be feeling happier, right? So again, I think social comparison happens. I think it's much more local. It's very temporary. But when you look overall across everything, then there's more emotional contagion, but it's very, very, very slight. I mean, these are posts that aren't even messages to you. They're just somebody saying something to the world, and the algorithm shows it to you. So it's kind of astonishing we're able to detect that anyways. But that's the science of the study.